problem. Now we're coming to the last thing in the medulla, which is the blood supply, and then the lesions of the medulla oblongata. Now, you guys, when we talk about the blood supply of the brainstem, if we talk about the blood supply of the brain, we have to mention the circle of Willis. I'm not going to talk about the whole circle because we're going to talk about that in a separate video. But I really want you guys to understand what happens here, because I don't want you to memorize. I just want you to understand. Remember, guys, when we said that this is our heart, all right, and we had the brachiocephalic trunk on the right side, it gives me the common carotid, subclavian, common carotid and subclavian. Remember that from the subclavian we had the vertebral arteries. Remember the vertebral arteries? Okay, so these are the vertebral arteries, guys. Vertebral arteries. What's gonna happen is, guys, look at the cerebellum. The cerebellum is a boss in this thing here, because there will be a fight now between the vertebral arteries, guys, are gonna ascend, all right, at the medulla. And once they reach the basilar part of bones, they will unite together to form the basilar artery. So this is the basilar artery, and these are the vertebral arteries. And this is going to be in the basilar groove in the bones. And we're going to talk about that, and we'll have the pontine branches for the bones. What's going to happen is the vertebral artery, guys, is going to give a branch, inferior branch to the cerebellum. The basilar artery will feel jealous, but not only jealous, he's going to be very jealous. What is he going to do? He is going to send a branch that mimics the branch of the vertebral. Not only that, he's going to send another branch that is superior to everyone. So what is the fight we have? It's between the vertebral artery and the basilar artery. And the fight is going to be where? Around the cerebellum, between the inferior surface and the superior surface. The vertebral, because it comes first and it comes posterior, the vertebral is going to give you something called the pica, the posterior inferior cerebellar artery. The vertebral artery is posterior and inferior. The basilar artery is also inferior, but it's not posterior. When it feels jealous, it's going to send an anterior branch, anterior inferior cerebellar artery. So the vertebral is going to give you pica. The basilar is going to feel jealous, and it's going to send ica. And not only that, it's going to leave the whole inferior surface, and it's going to send you a broad superior cerebellar artery. Why do I want you guys to know that? And one more thing, I just want to mention it before we finish the talk here about half of the circle of Willis. After all, the basilar, so the vertebral will give you the pica, all right? The pica down, here. And then the basilar will give you the ica, and then it will give you the superior cerebellar, because it's going to be very jealous from the vertebral. And now it will end by giving something called posterior cerebral artery, okay? Posterior cerebral, because that wants to supply the cerebral cortex now. This is what we call the vertebro-basilar system. We have another carotid system, and that will finish off the circle, and we're going to talk about that later on. Nothing is left for the circle of Willis, but what concerns me now, guys, is to understand what happens between vertebral artery and the basilar, because of these two guys, we will be able to know the blood supply of the three parts of the brainstem. Now, let's try to remember what are the branches that we talked about them in this fight, so that we can come to know what supplies the medulla, okay? The medulla is the first thing that comes down, right? So what's going to supply the medulla? It's going to be the vertebral artery and its branch. Perfect. What about the pons? The pons sent you two branches because it feels jealous, right? So one of them is the ica. So the ica and the basilar, they will supply the pons. So the basilar itself and the ica, they will supply the pons. Okay, so what are the last two things we have? It's basically the superior cerebellar and the termination of the basilar, which is the posterior cerebral artery. These two are going to supply the midbrain. So do you know why I explained to you the story of the vertebral and the basilar artery now? Because I don't want you to memorize, I just want you to remember this fight, and you go one by one. What did we mention? And please include the major arteries when we are saying that we have two arteries, major arteries supplying each part of the brainstem. So the major ones were the vertebral and the basilar. Okay? So we had the vertebral and each branch for the medulla, the pica. And then we have the basilar and the ica for the pons. And then the last terminal branches of the basilar, which are the superior cerebellar, it's not written here, and the posterior cerebral for the midbrain. Okay, so by now everyone knows the blood supply of the whole brainstem. So always study as a concept. Do not break down things. If they are related together, study them as one concept for the whole thing. Okay, so now we know that the vertebral and the pica are the blood supply, and of course the spinal arteries will supply the medulla. Now let's come to the injuries. What happens in the injuries? We have two important injuries, vascular lesions of the of the medulla. We have something called medial medullary syndrome, and we have something called lateral medullary syndrome. In the medial medullary syndrome, you guys, the problem is with your vertebral arteries, because the vertebral is medial, right? Remember? The vertebral was medial, and then the pica was lateral. Okay, so in the vertebral arteries here, this is medial medullary syndrome. So if I have occlusion, I would expect to have medial medullary syndrome. If I have occlusion to the pica, I would expect to have the lateral medullary syndrome. Okay, so this is the pica, right? So this is going to the lateral part of the medulla, and the vertebral arteries are going to the medial. Okay, what happens? Medial medullary syndrome. In the medial medullary syndrome, guys, first of all, I want you to remember that this is the syndrome that is related to hemiplegia. It's related to the motor problems. In the lateral, it's related to sensory problems. Okay, this is number one. Number two, remember a very magic word that I really like to say it to my students, which is the alternating something hemiplegia. Alternating something hemiplegia. What does that mean? I will have medial medullary syndrome. I will have a syndrome in the medial part of the pons. We're going to talk about that. We will have also a problem in the midbrain, in the middle of the midbrain, and something will apply to all of them, which is the magic word, the alternating something hemiplegia. What does that mean? Alternating hemiplegia means I will have contralateral hemiplegia in the body, in my body, contralateral, and I will have ipsilateral paralysis of the most important cranial nerve related to the brainstem level. If we are in the medulla, what is the most important cranial nerve? It's the hypoglossal. So if I have a patient with a tongue and a body, all right, and I'm telling you I have a medial medullary syndrome. Great, she told us we have a magic word. It's called alternating something hemiplegia. What does that mean? It means if I have a problem in my right side, I have contralateral loss of all movements of my body and ipsilateral hypoglossal nerve injury. Okay? It means I have contralateral hemiplegia in the corticospinal tracts and ipsilateral to the cranial nerve related to that brainstem level. If it's medullary, then hypoglossal. So I will have right hypoglossal injury. I will have deviation to the right side. Okay? Because this is lower motor neuron lesion. It's a problem in the hypoglossal nerve itself. Can you guys see the hypoglossal nerve as it exits between the pyramid and the olive? Remember, this is the hypoglossal nerve, and this is the pyramid. The pyramid has not been decussated yet. It's still descending. We are the butterfly level. We are descending, and we will cross down. So if I have a right side problem, the right hypoglossal nerve will be affected, and the left side of my body will be affected, because this is going to be the lateral corticospinal tract that goes to my body. You guys, this is a very golden magic phrase. Remember that, because we will mention that as we proceed in the pons and midbrain. Now here we will call it alternating hypoglossal hemiplegia. We will have in the medial medullary syndrome contralateral hemiplegia in the body, ipsilateral hypoglossal nerve injury, and we will have, of course, contralateral loss of conscious proprioception, because you remember, you guys, in the medial, remember that we said the medial lemniscus, remember the triangle I drew for you guys, so you will have a problem with that. And of course it's gonna be contralateral, because at that level the sensation was coming from your left body and it crossed already at the lower level and it ascended at that level. Remember, so this is the fasciculus grassus and cuneatus with proprioceptive sensation, and they crossed at the sensory decussation level. Okay, so they already crossed, so sensation from here are lost. So if I have a right side injury here, I will lose sensation from the left side of the body. I will lose movement from the left side of the body. However, in the cranial nerve, it's gonna be on the same side. Okay, what happens to the lateral medullary syndrome? It's all, you guys, related to the sensations. It's in the lateral part of your medulla. What do you ever have in the butterfly part of our... Can you guys remember everything that you have? Can you guys remember that you have the pain temperature, you have your cerebellar peduncle, so you will have cerebellar problems, ataxia, you have your autonomic fibers descending at that level, so you'll have Horner's syndrome, which is ptosis, meiosis, anhydrosis, all right, and ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature of the face, because of what, guys? Because of what? This is the nosy trigeminal nucleus. Remember the spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve? It was related to the lateral. So you guys, everything, remember, you remember about the your medulla, you just remember it for the lateral medullary syndrome. Okay, so you have loss of pain and temperature from your body. Why? Because the same idea here. It has been already crossed at the spinal cord level. So it's going to be contralateral. Remember? Because if that was your spinal cord, it has been already crossed. When we had it down here, it has been already crossed. So if I have a right side problem, I will lose pain and temperature in the left side of the body. This is already mentioned in the spinal cord. I will have problems with the vestibular area. What kind of problems are these? The vertigo, the nystagmus, the uncontrolled movements, you guys, because vestibular system is what controls your movements. So you're going to have these uncontrolled movements of your eyes. You're going to have the vertigo, all right? And the nucleus ambiguous, guys, remember that was my motor nucleus for the my stuff in my throat that would help me to talk, that would help me to swallow. So if I have a problem with the nucleus ambiguous, I'm gonna have something good, dysarthria. I won't be able to talk. I will have dysphagia. I won't be able to swallow, because this is the motor nucleus for the pharynx and larynx. You guys remember the vagus at the previous table? Okay, so I think everything is easy now. And of course the cerebellar problems, because you guys have the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So you guys, just when you want to study the medulla, the medial thing is our golden phrase, and the lateral thing is everything sensation, everything else that we've ever studied in the medulla. I hope you guys, that made your life easy. What happened? Yeah. So this is all you guys need to know. I hope you guys grasped everything, and thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the pons and midbrain, and of course, inshallah, the next videos. Thank you guys, and see you.